I served in the last war. I dealt in death, it was all I knew. But with the war now ended and my home destroyed, I cast my eyes to the horizon and the city of Stormreach. With tales of danger and endless riches, it called to someone like me, a warrior, a mercenary, an adventurer, a lost soul. This time fortune smiled upon me, for I have found many like myself, heroes from the far corners of the world, dealers of death, life, courage. We charge into the abyss, searching for the ultimate reward. Setting steel and magic against impossible foes. And each time I wonder, will this adventure be my last? Now storms gather on the horizon. Evil rises from the waters of despair and misery. An ancient and terrible curse is upon us.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that was the intro video for Dungeons & Dragons Online. So this is going to be a new segment that I'm going to be doing on Dungeons & Dragons Online, or DDO, DDO as we call it. This is a really fun game. I really enjoy playing it. I've been playing for quite a while. It's pretty popular, but if you've never heard of it, then hey, that's what I'm here for. As you can kind of see, this is kind of your screen here once you've made an account and stuff and logged in for the first time. Although usually you have an empty character selection. As you can see, I have several characters because, again, I've played for quite a while. So I've got a number of different characters. I've got a barbarian, I've got a ranger, I've got a monk. This is my main character that I play with most often. He's had several incarnations now. This is an artificer. This is a mix of monk and druid and fighter. This is another monk that I've been working on, and a barbarian, bard, and fighter. So anyway, we are going to create a new character, and what I hope to do is just to kind of give you a brief tutorial of some of the main quests and some of the most basic parts of this game. So we're gonna that aren't necessarily available when you first start playing. I'll try to give you an idea of what it would be like if you're playing for the first time, but just keep in mind that I have unlocked some things that aren't going to be available to everyone. So when you first go into your character creation screen, you'll be confronted with a bunch of different options here on the side. So first thing, you probably want to figure out male or female. Sometimes you might want to go back and forth because the characterization is very different for both of them. So you'll start there. I'm going to make a male character. And then you're going to have to pick the style of play. Now there's 3 styles of play. There's melee, and they tell you over here, hand-to-hand, up-close combat. Spellcasters, so there's wizards, sorcerers, clerics, things like that. And then there are specialists, and those are typically your rogues, bards, things like that that don't fit necessarily into one or the other category. They also have added recently something called iconic. Now, I don't have any iconic things unlocked. Iconic characters are really just pre-built characters that are supposed to have everything that goes into it, and really they're kind of gimmicky, but they're for someone who just wants to try out those things, and you can try those if you've unlocked them. So anyway, we are going to try a melee. So once you pick the type you want, you can click next. For those of you, again, who have never played a game like this, it's similar in enough ways to a pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder game or something like that, that if you've played one of those before, I think you would be fairly comfortable starting and creating a character in here, because the character generation, unlike most MMOs, actually gives you some real options. That's one of the reasons that I like this game a lot, is because your character creation can make or break a character, although usually you can make any character work if you put points into where you need him. So I'll go with melee. You can always come back and pick a different option. Typically, if you haven't played a game like this, melee is going to be the easiest route, because there's not a lot of special skills that you might need to use and look at. Spellcasters are usually a little bit more difficult. They've got a lot of different things that they've got to keep an eye on, because they have lots of different spells, especially if you're a healer. Healers are probably the most difficult to play just because it's taxing. You've got to keep an eye on everybody. Specialists are kind of mid difficulty, depending on what you choose as a specialty. So in melee, we'll click next, and that takes us to the classes. Now, in melee classes, you have the fighter. He is about the most basic character you can get. So if you haven't played a game like this, I'd definitely go with a fighter, just to kind of get a feel of the game itself, and then later on you can come back and do some more with it. So they kind of give you some information about these over here. You can go to more info, and they tell you a bit more about it, and statistics. They tell you what's important for them. There's also the barbarian. Barbarians are a little more tough to play because they do have some special skills that you need to keep an eye on with them. There are paladins, and they are kind of holy warriors. They do get some spells later on, but they start off as just a basic kind of melee fighter. And then my favorite class to play is the monk. And I honestly can't tell you why I chose to play a monk, kind of the first character I built, and I just fell in love. I love the monks. Hand-to-hand combat, getting in close, using a bunch of key abilities, and it's just my favorite class. However, monks also can be a little tricky to play because they've got a lot of special abilities that you got to balance later on. So I'm going to create a paladin character for us to play. That's going to be just kind of a good, you can see here, solo ability, very good. The nice thing about this game is you can play solo. They have some different mechanics in the game that allow you to play almost anything solo. You won't really have to group until you get to the higher level content or raid content later on. Just to give you some background on the other classes, though, I'll go through all of them. In the spell classes, you have the sorcerer. Sorcerers are difficult to play. Well, any spellcaster is difficult to play. Sorcerers are based on charisma, and they can use their spells. They don't have to train them, but they have a limited number of spells. Wizards, on the other hand, have a lot more spells. They can pretty much learn any spell, but they have to switch them out every time they want to switch those. They can't just do it on the fly. Both of those are what are called arcane spellcasters. Then there are clerics. Cleric's a healer class. Very good solo, but also not a lot of attacking power. They're mostly for healing, and a lot of really useful spells at the higher levels. Now, Favored Soul is kind of unique to DDO. It's a mix of a healer class and a spellcaster. Usually they have enough healing ability that they can heal just as well as a cleric, but they can also focus on some melee and damaging spells as well. And then there's druids, and druids focus on natural magic and shape-shifting. And this was kind of surprised a couple years ago not even a couple years ago, I think it was last year that they added in the druid class, and you can shapeshift into a bear or into a wolf and do some different things like that. It's pretty cool. And then go back to specialists. In specialists, you have the ranger. So they're obviously your um, long ranged attacks. They actually get a lot of really cool abilities. I have a ranger. Usually there's two different types. There's a 2-weapon ranger that gets close and uses 2 different weapons, and then there's the archer, and you can get an arcane archer to do a lot of different types of attacks. The rogue's a pretty critical class. They're also very challenging to play. When I first started playing this, I convinced my wife to play with me with my monk, and she chose a rogue, and together we can pretty much solo everything up until that higher content, because she can handle all the traps and things like that that come up and find secret doors and things like that, and I could beat down on anyone until she got enough sneak attack to take them out. Then there's the bard. The bard has a lot of spells and their songs, which can increase attack power, things like that, that help everybody around them. And then the artificer is another class that was added, and the artificer is pretty cool. They can create constructs like this here, and then they can also use what's called rune arms to attack, and they can build turrets and things like that. They're a pretty cool class. I haven't played too much with them, although I have one, but I like what I've done with them. And they use a crossbow typically, and they use some pretty cool attacks with the crossbow. So anyway, those are all the classes. Let's go back, and we're going to create a paladin, like I said. So once you pick your class, you click next, and they give you some options. Step 3 is called the path. Now, they give you different options here, and they kind of give you a brief rundown of all these, where they kind of pre-create everything. They put everything together for you. You don't want to do that. You always want to customize. It gives you the most control over your character. If you're just looking to try something out and see whether you like the game, then maybe pick one of those. But typically, if you're actually going to play the game seriously, go to customize. And again, if you're familiar with any pen and paper game, should be fairly easy to do, creating your character. So next we'll go to race. Now race, there's human, elf, halfling, dwarf, warforged, half-elf, drow elf, and half-orc. Now you can see some of these I haven't unlocked, not because I couldn't, it's just because I didn't care to unlock them. I never have cared to play a warforged. They have some cool abilities. They're kind of like robots, but they're magically constructed, magically ran. They're pretty cool. They have a lot of immunities that other things don't. You can see they are immune to poison, disease, paralysis. They can be healed by a repair spell rather than a heal spell. So things like that make them kind of cool, but I just have never played one. The half-orc I have played before, but I just didn't care to unlock them. Again, I played them when I was paying for the game, which, by the way, this is a free-to-play game. You just unlock stuff as you play, which I think is pretty cool. So anyway, we have some options here. Humans are always a good way to go because they get an extra feat, which is kind of one of your special abilities. So they get an extra one when you create a human. Elves are kind of cool. Halflings are always good for making a character that needs to be really dexterous. Dwarves are a good option. Half-elves, I go with half-elf most often because they kind of combine strengths of human and some of the other abilities. And then there's drow elf, which are dark elves. Now, for a paladin, if you go back to that class and you look, paladin, well, go back to the class, there we go. So paladins, they want strength and charisma are their most important statistics. So those are something that you want to make sure you have a good amount of. So when we pick a race, we want to have one that either has a bonus to both of those, one or the other, but you don't want one that's going to take a penalty. Now, elves have a high dexterity and a low constitution. Halflings have a high dexterity and a lower strength. Dwarves start with higher constitution and lower charisma. Half-elves and humans both take no penalty. And drow elves have higher dex and intelligence and charisma, but a lower constitution, which means they have less health. In this circumstance, I'm going to go with a human. So kind of most basic there. So let's move on to our... Alright, so now that we've moved to that, we have our customization. So it starts with your stat points and your ability scores. Now, because, again, I've played the game for a while, I get to start with a 32-point build, which means I have 32 points to distribute in my ability scores. If you've never played before, you'll usually start, or you will start, I guess, with a 28-point build. Now, that's only a 4-point difference, but that can make quite a bit of difference in your final build. So it's something to keep in mind that you'll start with a 28-point build until you've played enough to unlock a higher build like the 32-point. So you can see the rundown. We have strength, which affects melee damage, chance, and melee attack chance. The dexterity affects your armor class, which is your physical defense, your reflex saves, and ranged attack. Constitution affects your hit points and fortitude save. Intelligence is skill points and spellcasting ability for wizards and artificers. Wisdom is will saves, spellcasting abilities for clerics, druids, paladins, rangers, and key regeneration for monks. And then charisma affects spellcasting ability for sorcerers, bards, favored souls, and the turning ability for clerics and paladins. Okay, so a lot of stuff there. But because we have a paladin, we said we want to focus on strength and wisdom. So the first thing I'm going to do is raise those fairly evenly. We're going to start with 12 wisdom. We'll bring strength up to 16. Now, dex is our armor class, so we want to have that decent. We don't want to take a penalty to that. You can see for every 2 above 10, you'll get a ability modifier. So at 10, it's 0. If you have below 10, you get a negative for every 2 below. Now, constitution is always important because that affects your hit points. So you want to make sure you have a decent constitution. I'll put that at 14. It might be a little tough on a 28-point build. You might have to start with a 12 or 13 constitution, but I recommend at least 14 constitution for any character. Charisma, I'll put at a 12 as well because that affects our turning ability. You know what? Actually, let's put that at 10 for now. Bring intelligence up. I don't want to be taking a penalty to anything. So now we've got that raised there. Let's put another one here in wisdom and another one. 4 points left. You can see the cost here. If I do another strength, it's going to cost me 3. If I do another wisdom or constitution, it will cost me 2. Let's do... Let's do another one in strength, and we'll put one in dexterity. Now, typically, you don't want to have an odd score because it doesn't give you any strength. It doesn't give you anything to your modifier. But you can add points later on, and those are going to be 2 that I want to add a little bit later on. The rest of these pretty much will stay what they are for the rest of the game. It's really going to be your strength, dex, and constitution that you'll focus on, especially strength since that affects our attacks. So we will go ahead. We've got 12 hit points, 20 spell points, which is how you cast spells, although I don't get any spells until level 4, so that's not too big of a deal. And then your 3 saves, fortitude, reflex, and will. So let's go ahead. We'll start with this. We'll go to next. So now we have our skill points. So skill points there's a lot of different things that skill points do. They kind of give you a passive bonus to different things. So if they have that octagon shape, it's a passive ability. If it's a square, then that means that's an active ability that you can use. Now, for a paladin, class skills, so those are the ones that they should be using. You have concentration, diplomacy, and heal. And then intimidate and spot are always good to put on a paladin, although again, you don't have to do that. You get all the customization you want. Now, concentration, if you move your mouse over, it tells you it affects your spell casting. Whenever you get attacked when you're trying to cast a spell, you make a concentration check. If you fail it, then your spell casting fails as well. I'm going to put 1 in concentration to start with because it's honestly not going to be that big of a deal. I'm not going to be casting in the middle of battle for the most part. So just enough that we can kind of get started. Now, some people really like to use some of these skills like diplomacy and intimidate. I typically don't. I really haven't used those skills for much of anything. Now, diplomacy will allow you to find it kind of convinces monsters and stuff to find targets other than yourself, so it kind of convinces them, oh, go attack that thing over there. That's nice, but I have never used that. I never really gotten into that place where I want them to attack someone else. Intimidate, however, allows you to intimidate and draw the attention of monsters away from other people towards yourself. That is something that could be pretty important for a paladin, especially if I want to be a tank, someone who draws the attention and holds the attention of a monster so other people can beat up on them. So I'll put points in intimidate. I'll put a couple points in heal. Not that heal's very useful because you don't really heal other people so much, but because it allows you to heal more when you heal at a shrine, which is something that I'll show you later on. Let's see. You have some other skills down here. If they have the star next to them, that means that they are not class skills. So when you put a point in them, you only get half a point. So jump is always good. So I'll put 2 points in jump. And as you could see, each point I put in only actually gives me half a point because it's not a class skill. And then I will put a point in spot. That allows me to find enemies. And I will also put some points in, let's see, swim's not really that useful. Spellcraft, that's spell power for types of damage to your spells. So I'll put 2 in, well, I'm not going to have spells for a while, so maybe I'll hold on to that. I'll put 1 in tumble, because you want to be able to tumble, and I'll show you that as well later on. And let's go ahead and put another 1 in jump. So there we go. So now we've got all our skill points. We'll click next. And now the feats. So feats are your extraordinary abilities that your character can do, or abilities that they have. For a paladin, they give you a lot of different ideas depending on what you want to do. But again, the choice is yours. So they do all sorts of different things. They give you some options like power attack, weapon focus, stunning blow, point blank shot, dodge, and combat expertise. Shield mastery, tower shield proficiency, improved shield bash. So if you want to use a shield, some of those would be good. Now, one thing I would say you should probably always get at some point is a toughness. I'm going to go ahead and take a toughness as my bonus feat. That increases your hit points each level, so that's good. And you can take more than 1 if that's something you want to do. Now, tower shield proficiency, that lets you use a tower shield, which gives you more protection. That's something that we might take later on. A bunch of skill focuses, that gives you a bonus to a skill. Let's see what else. Power attack. Power attack could be useful. It trades attack bonus for extra damage on your attacks. Well, that's good. It can also leave you hitting less often than you would like. Let's see. I have to pick a class feat, which are these yellow ones. And I'm pretty sure those are my only options. I can pick Silver Flame, which gives me proficiency with longbows, and Sovereign Host, which gives me proficiency with long swords. I'm going to go with the long swords. And we need one more feat. Let's go with... If you build a character, it'd be a good idea. Just spend some time, move your mouse over these, and read what each one does. I think, though, that I will go with the Shield Mastery. So that will give me some bonus to his shield, because as a paladin, I'm going to use a sword and a shield. So we'll go next. So this just gives you a summary of everything that you have. So my stats, my feats, including the ones that you are given upon creating your character, and my skills. So finally we get to the appearance. So right now it's pretty ugly. Now you can click randomize, and it'll kind of randomly go through different faces. If you find something that you like, you can lock that part in. So let's just kind of randomize for a while till we find something that looks decent. I really don't like the scars. I hate when they put the scars on them. So we'll lock that out. You know, that looks pretty decent. I think we'll go with that. Again, you can kind of play with that. You've got all sorts of different options for that. But this looks good. Now you want to pick your name. And your name and your surname. Now, surnames aren't really that important. The name is the main thing. Surnames are just kind of an extra flavor to your character. Now, every single one of my characters has the surname Creepy. So I'm going to go ahead with that surname Creepy there. And usually I try to come up with something that goes with that. So let's see. For this guy, let's go with... I'll go Mega Creepy. Let's see if that's going to allow me to do that. And as a paladin, your only alignment option is Lawful Good. Your alignment kind of dictates what sort of weapons you can use, because different alignment weapons, sometimes you won't be able to use those if you don't meet the alignment requirement. So let's see. Mega Creepy, is it taken? No, it is not. Alright, so we have created our character, Mega Creepy. And next time we will go ahead and jump in and do the intro quest and look around the first area. So thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments. I'm sure some people will say, hey, you screwed this up. Well, you know what? If it happens, it happens. But typically you can make your character work no matter what you do. So please like and subscribe and join us next time when we jump into our intro and the first area of Dungeons & Dragons Online. Until next time, play some games and have some fun. See ya!